Hey all, here are OS Reviews. In this video, just for fun, we're taking a look at a haul of tech gadgets from Temu. It's one of the fastest growing e-commerce sites and can be thought of as an alternative to places like AliExpress, Wish.com, and to some extent also eBay and Amazon. The difference though is similar to AliExpress and Wish, they're mostly shipping products from China directly and oftentimes at a pretty steep discount compared to other stores and retailers. And that's one of the reasons why this platform has been so popular, but also generated quite a bit of controversy, whether it's good or not. Now, my take is it's just like any other shopping platform, which is to say anything that you're purchasing shouldn't be overly impulsive, but if it's something that you actually need or if you find to be useful in your life, then just like AliExpress, it can be a legitimate place to shop. In fact, most of these orders come in around just a week or two, so the shipping speeds aren't too slow either. I'll also be upfront and say that this video is not sponsored in any form or fashion. All the items that you're about to see I purchased myself and just wanted to take a closer look at and have an honest impression of whether they function well or maybe don't work quite as well as advertised. And the first two items I picked up were from Xiaomi, a pretty well-known smartphone brand that also has ventured out into lifestyle items, including this backpack and a set of gel pens. So it's a stereotype that Temu only sells generic / no brand items, but that's actually not completely true. You can find authentic Xiaomi, Lenovo items as well when you're shopping here. Again, very similar to sites like AliExpress. So this backpack in particular is a little on the small side, but it was only around $8. And it is super lightweight / water resistant. It can be used for just a really quick and casual outing when you're going into the city. It's also, I think, touted as a youth edition product because of the, again, more lightweight and colorful nature, weighing only 165 grams, which is extremely light. But at the same time, it's not the most well-padded backpack. If you're looking for something super durable to be a bit more rough, then this is probably not going to be the one for you. And also just keep in mind that it is quite small at the end of the day. So for example, this is a 12-inch laptop, and you can tell that it kind of barely fits into this backpack. It's not really meant for kind of larger laptops. It's really meant for tablets, a phone, maybe a wallet, or some documents, and that is mostly it. There are some fine attention to detail here, including the zippers, which have this interesting rubber texture to them, making them a little bit easier to pull up and down. Nothing really catches at the very least. And on the inside, although there isn't too much padding, as aforementioned, there is an extra pocket that you can slide in something like a tablet, for example. And there's a front pocket here as well that you can use to, again, slide in something small, including, say, a phone that can tuck away into this smaller compartment there. And the two sides also do feature water bottle compartments as well, and this is what it looks like on the back. Again, shoulder pads don't have the most generous padding, but it's still good enough. There's a small handle, and also just kind of a tag here that just states that it is an authentic Xiaomi product. Now, the next item here is going to be a set of pens. Now, the story behind this is a couple of years back, we actually reviewed some gel pens from Xiaomi, which have become actually one of my favorites. There was this aluminum edition that felt super premium and high-end, very similar to a flagship smartphone. And there's also a slightly cheaper polycarbonate plastic version of the same pen. So I picked up another one of their pens. A pack of 10 only sells for around $6, comes in either black or red, so it's a little bit more cost-effective compared to the past version here, especially the metal one, which was about $10 for a single one. But these are going to be a little bit more lightweight and don't have quite as strong of a design. That being said, the ink cartridge they claim have been imported from Japan. It has 4 times the writing length of ordinary ink, kind of water gel-based pens. So as some of you guys may know, gel pens tend to dry out a little bit faster, even though they're super smooth when you're writing. That's one of the typical pain points, but they claim that this thing will last for similar length, in fact, to just a regular ballpoint pen. And the specific meter here that's rated for is 1,600, and it can write over 50,000 words or characters before it dries out. It also claims to be super fast to dry, won't really stain, and will be water resistant as well, very smooth. And also the tip here made out of metal is sourced from a Swiss machine, so it has a little bit more attention to detail. Again, this is the red colored variant. There's also a production date labeled on the very top, and otherwise quite a simple product, but still has a kind of Me logo here on the very top here of the clip, although it's plastic again this time around, as compared to the other ones, just feeling a little bit more premium there, but not too surprising considering this is a lower cost item. And here is what the metal tip there looks like. The cap here can just pop onto the back when you're writing. And indeed, it flows really well as you are scribbling things down. The line is actually quite clean, and the benefit, again, of a gel-type pen is you don't have to press very hard for the ink to essentially just flow out super naturally. And similarly, very quick to dry after just a split second or so. I can smudge over it and nothing is really rubbing off. Now, when it comes to having a little bit of water over it, it also seems to not be too problematic there either. It doesn't really stain or smear. Has pretty good cost to performance ratio like most Xiaomi products that we've seen in the past. And while on the topic of stationery, I have one last pen in this particular video. These are called Frixion Erasable gel pens. So if you apply a little bit of heat, such as microwaving it or just using the eraser tip there, apparently the ink can completely come off. Can also be a good replacement pen for the Rocketbook Smart Notebooks, which similarly you can microwave to erase everything from the pages here. And this sells in a pack of 2 for about $2, so not too bad. Comes in colors of blue and black for the ink cartridge, and again the eraser tip there just applies friction as you are erasing. The overall build quality though is definitely a little cheaper feeling compared to the Xiaomi pen. The plastic feels a little bit more loose and hollow, and also the grip section, so to speak, is really just painted on there using the plastic. So it isn't quite as premium there, but at the very least you can press down on the clip here to reveal the tips. Writing experience is not bad. It actually flows quite well, similar to other, again, gel-type pens. You don't have to apply very much force for it to write. And if we try out the eraser functionality here, just by turning it around, applying some friction over it, you can tell that indeed the ink here can pretty much disappear with friction either from the tip here or again applying a bit of heat in the microwave. Although if you do get a little bit wet, it seems to stain a little bit more compared to the Xiaomi pen, so it's not quite as waterproof in this particular instance. Next, we have 2 small LED USB type night lights. But what makes them cool is they have smart voice control. So there's a microphone in them, and if you talk, saying certain commands similar to a Alexa device or a home assistant, it's able to change things like the brightness, higher or lower, even the color. And because this thing doesn't connect to the internet, so there's no real risk of having a microphone in there, it's not transmitting any data, it can still be a pretty neat application, again, controlling it from afar without having to touch it using your hands. And there's 2 versions floating around, one which is for English, the other which is Chinese, so make sure you choose the correct version depending on the language that you speak, because the voice prompts will be programmed to only work in that particular language. And inside here we have just the USB light. I do really like the transparent shell, it just makes it seem a little bit more interesting, high-tech than it really is. Reminds me of something like an Arduino PCB board, and you can also tell on the back there are the same instructions printed on here in case you lose the user guide, which is actually quite thoughtful. And otherwise a simple standard USB Type-A port. And then the second one here, the cute little rabbit edition, also has very similar prompts. It can still be used to illuminate some objects in the dark if you're doing some quick reading, for instance. And I do like the fact that the light is on both the front and the back of the board. Switch off the light, turn on the light, change the color, change the color, change the color, change the color. So it does indeed work, and once you activate the changing color mode, it will then stay persistent on the one that you've set, compared to the looping animation that we saw there from the beginning, that is by default. Brighten the light, brighten the light, dim the light, dim the light, music mode, and now it will be reactive to the microphones. Whenever it's hearing a beat of sound, it will then change the color as you saw there interactively. Colorful mode, which will then cycle back into the rainbow RGB effect that we saw there from before. So actually quite easy to use. There's also a small clip there for a lanyard or a keychain if you want to hang it onto a backpack. So let's try the bunny edition, which will be, I think, quite similar. But you can tell here by default it starts off in a white glow. It's a little bit softer, more diffuse because of the plastic over the bunny's top and bottom there. So a little bit more cute. And we have similar commands like switch off the light, turn on the light. That being said, it seems like changing the color of the light is a little harder to trigger on this model for some reason. Change the color. So you can tell it's a little bit more finicky there, and this is actually not an RGB model, meaning that it only changes the color temperature of the white light to be colder versus warmer, as opposed to the other one which can change into blues, greens, reds, so on and so forth. But we can also do things like brighten the light to make it a little bit higher versus dim the light to make it a little bit dimmer. And on the topic of lighting, we have 3 other interesting lights we'll take a quick look at. This one is a mini table lamp that claims to be crystal style and creates an interesting ambiance using the reflective prisms on the sides, basically, as you put it down onto a table. It also includes a remote to change the color as well as the lighting mode, but the top is also touch sensitive and it's rechargeable. This one also sells for around $6 or so. What I will say is because Temu tries to save on shipping costs, they just throw things into a plastic bag. And so as a result, some of the cardboard boxes can get a little bit squished, as you can tell here. So keep that in mind if you're picking something up as a gift. The presentation there may not be quite as good as, say, Amazon, which ships their items more carefully in a cardboard box. But nonetheless, the item here, again, just tells us some of the modes that we saw from before. And it looks like even the acrylic plastic has a few different color versions that you can pick. Ours is just a transparent crystal color, and there's just a basic remote there that takes us to cell CR2032 battery. Otherwise, it just includes a simple USB Type-C cable in the packaging as well for charging up the lamp, taking about an hour and a half to fully recharge, and it can be used when being plugged into power as well. Kind of an interesting design there. I guess the battery is on the base and then just has a simple LED here connecting to the top, and if you touch on this capacitive sensor, it will wake up basically. Now, one interesting thing though is that the LEDs do tend to heat up a bit, especially if you're charging it while using it at the same time. It actually gets surprisingly toasty at the top. It's not overly alarming, I'd say, but just something I found interesting compared to other flashlights, for instance, that don't tend to get quite as warm, but the effect is definitely obvious, and once you have a slightly darker space, it definitely has quite an interesting touch with the prism shapes here on the sides. It actually is quite beautiful to look at. And we can also cycle through individual colors here on the top, including greens, blues, reds, and then going into some of the more candle-colored, violet, so on and so forth. And especially on a white surface, I would argue it actually looks the most dramatic in terms of the patterns that it produces. And for something so simple, again, it is just a piece of plastic covering the LEDs, it is working better than I expected. And last but not least, just holding on the top base for a couple of seconds will turn the entire light off. Next up is a fairy/LED curtain light that you can just attach onto the top of, again, a curtain and just illuminating the entire room with a bit more ambiance without taking up additional space. There's a built-in remote, and there are a few variants floating around, some which are programmed to have only a single color, but there's also a multicolored RGB version that can change between different shades, and there's also a few different versions in terms of size, including 100 LEDs, 200 or 300 LEDs. That corresponds to the density of the lights. If they're more dense, you get a more strong effect once you hang them up. Can also be used in DIY projects. I'll also mention that there is a more expensive version that sells around $50 that has a app component. It becomes almost a pixel art type display. I think Govee also has a version as well. But this smart curtain lamp will be, again, a little bit more expensive as a result. This is more of the basic version, which again is just sub $10. And to be honest, it's a lot smaller than I expected when everything is just folded up using the memory wire here, essentially, and just the simple remote that takes a, again, cell 2032 battery. You can go through some of the different animations, and then it just connects to a USB power source, including a laptop, power bank, or wall adapter, and there's a manual power on and off switch on here as well. The entire assembly process just takes a couple of minutes and basically unroll all of the wires there, so making sure they can dangle down properly. Here's the overall impact of the kind of standard 300 LED light version. So the density is actually not as high as some of the images make it seem. I suspect if you want something to be really lit across the entire curtain, you might have to purchase a set of 2 and then kind of put both of them up so they're spaced more closely together. But actually the effect is not bad, especially if you, again, have something like a curtain that is diffusing the light. It does add a pretty nice ambiance into the entire room. Some of the flashing animations can be seen here, going through a loop of brighter versus dimmer, and it does actually look quite beautiful, especially here in the holiday seasons. And I would say that the presence of the curtain definitely makes the effect more magical and, again, diffuse. Without it, it definitely doesn't look quite as interesting. Again, they are just strings of small LEDs that are programmed to flash and strobe accordingly. That being said, it's definitely not the brightest light in the world, so it's more like a night light, to be completely honest, rather than, say, a reading lamp, since they are very small, energy-efficient LEDs at the end of the day. And the final lighting product is this DIY cloud-style astronaut rocket lamp, and I thought this would be kind of similar to those moon lamps, which look really cool and add a splash of color, kind of like a night light in the background. That being said, this particular version, again, is DIY, so the way that it comes out of the box is essentially just a poofed up ball of cotton, and you're supposed to mold it into the shape of the cloud that you want just by literally pulling around the cloud. So you can kind of shape it almost like clay in that way, but you also have to position the rocket onto the top yourself, and the lighting piece is really just some string LEDs, actually quite similar to the curtain lights that you saw earlier that you have to then wrap onto the inside of the cloud. So you can kind of make it out here on the side, some of those string LED lights, and it's all just sitting on a pretty low-cost plastic plate on the very bottoms. So to be completely honest, although the idea of a cloud lamp is really cool, I probably wouldn't pick this up again. However, it can be kind of a fun, maybe mini project for kids to play around with, but also one aspect I don't really like here is that the LED string light is tied to a battery box that uses cell-based batteries, which have to be replaced, as you can tell here, as opposed to something more standard like a AA cell, or better yet, just making it a USB Type-A plug, or have it be rechargeable, since these coin batteries are just not really standard at the end of the day. But anyways, this is kind of what it looks like once you turn it on. For something so simple, I guess the effect is not bad, and the cloud does look surprisingly convincing. You can also tap on the side here to cycle through some modes, including a more slow changing one, gently getting warmer versus colder, and does feel surprisingly convincing to an actual cloud. But again, just is a little bit too delicate in terms of how it's constructed, in addition to, if you think about it, something like this is kind of hard to clean from dust as well, because you can't really wipe it down. Overall, I think make this more of a neat concept rather than an actual product in practice. Okay, so the next item is called a Fingerbot, aka SwitchBot. It's basically a motorized arm that can press down onto any mechanical button, and you're able to program it with the companion app. You can automate it as well as manually control it from afar using the phone. So it turns regular appliances with just a normal switch into kind of a smart one. That said, this particular gadget is also a little bit on the higher side compared to the other items we've seen, sometimes selling for around 20 to 30 bucks. Also, keep in mind that if you're using this for a switch-style lamp that it can press down on to turn on a light, which is traditional in your house, it can only press down on it. And if you want to then press upwards to, say, turn it off, you have to get a second SwitchBot to be mounted onto the top, for example. There's also some replacement tabs for the arm, and also a set that you can use to mount it onto a surface using these 3M sticky pads if you want to stick it onto the wall, for example. At the very least, it is indeed quite small, and it just charges using a standard USB Type-C port there on the back. And in most cases, if you're using the Switch, let's say for 2 times a day, you can expect it to last about a month before you have to really recharge it again. You will eventually need to take it out for charging, or you can plug it in while it's still mounted onto that spot. So keep that in mind. A simple LED status light and also a power switch can be found there on the side, and you can hear the kind of sound of the motor there start up. And those aforementioned replacement arm tips also come in slightly different sizes depending on the type of button you're trying to press or the position that you're mounting it. You can then slide it in. For example, this one is in the shape of a ring. I guess if you have a button placed on the inside and it can pull it up and down, for example, a smaller switch compared to buttons that you're pressing down on, you can use the other stopper style instead. So the companion app here is called Smart Life. It's a generic app that seems to also work with many other smart home appliance products. We can click to start, so this essentially will trigger the button to go up and down, as you can tell there with the animation. As for automation, you can click on timer, and from here you can add it in terms of certain days of the week, as well as certain times that you want it to turn on versus turn off. You can choose between either a click or a press. So a click will be going all the way upwards, versus a press is actually a slightly shorter action. As you can tell, they're slightly more in between, depending on the distance away from the button that you're trying to press. And if you really want to get into nitty-gritty, you can even control the motorized arm in terms of the path setting, as well as the rebound time. So as far as the feat of engineering and robotics are concerned, it is quite cool, especially in something so small. But ultimately, again, the functionality is quite simple, and whether or not it'd be super practical depends on the type of switches and buttons that you have around your house. So it's a cute mini robot for home automation, but personally I just find it to be a little bit too limited in terms of use cases to be necessarily worth it for me personally. But again, this will vary from person to person. If you have certain appliances and switches that fits the design that this is intended for, then it could be still worth considering. Next up, here is a cute coin bank or piggy bank that has a motorized kitten that will basically steal the money that you place on top of this box. Definitely a novelty item, but cute nonetheless as a piggy bank. There's a few different variants as well, including a cat as well as a panda that you can all kind of pick between, and they're pretty low cost as well, only around $7 to $10 a pop. Even the cat version comes with 3 different variants in terms of what's printed on the outside of the cardboard box. We do have plenty of accents, including some of the stamps that says fragile, handled with care, and really trying to simulate a real cardboard box with some paws. That's also where the sound comes out of, the small speaker. And the very top here includes the aforementioned plate where you can place the money onto, press down on it. And on the very bottom here is also where you can manually turn it on or off, and it operates using 2 standard AA batteries. And you can remove the coins from here once it reaches full. That being said, there really isn't a lock or safe to this piggy bank, so to speak. It really is just about that fun animatronics of the moving cat more than anything else. And it's universal, so any type of coin, any currency will work. You just have to press down onto the plate once you pop it on. The cat will pop out there on the top, and it will reach for the coin, and it just pops itself back down. Even again, smaller coins as well will work just fine. Simple item at the end of the day, but nonetheless still quite cute. Now if we kind of pop open the lid of the box here, you can tell that the arm is technically slightly soft. It's kind of made out of foam. And in case you want something similar but not exactly a fan of the cat, there's another kind of creepy but still interesting coin bank which is in the shape of a face that is another alternative. This will physically eat the coins that you pop into the face, or really the mouth I should say, while making a munching expression as it is swallowing the coin because of the latex silicone over the top of the bank. Maybe a little creepy, but still interesting nonetheless. Now here are also 2 sleeping or eye compression masks that you can also find, which similarly have kind of a cute appearance. This one here of a crying emoji. There is a USB type A plug, and subsequently there is a heated pad inside that will make you feel a little bit warm if you're trying to recover from eyes feeling really fatigued. You can control the temperature as well, switching between 36 degrees to 50 degrees Celsius, and also a timer of 20 to 60 minutes before it turns off. Can also be an interesting idea in the winter time as well, again just to make you feel a little bit more warm. And on the opposite side of the spectrum, there is a cold compressed version, reduce swelling if your eyes are feeling also really puffy or tired, for example. And by the way, there are slightly more expensive versions as well, including a eye massage variant, which in addition to heat, there's also some motors that will push the silicone pads into your face, essentially giving you the sensation of a eye massage. So that will be a 2-in-1 heat plus massage variant, but also sells for a little bit more. And the opposite of hot being cold, so now moving into some neck style fans that you can find on Temu. The concept here being actually quite popular whenever you're feeling a bit stuffy and you just want to circulate some of the air around. So even though it's actually wintertime right now in the US. In other places, including Australia, it actually is summertime, not to mention that summer will be here around the corner. So this can still be something to consider. A lot of these are actually quite cheap, including this cartoon style neck fan that is only around $10 a pop, having these kind of cute characters printed on the side. Now, what I will say though is some of the images and descriptions here can be a little bit misleading. If you're looking at some of the cheaper versions, they claim to have this metal quote-unquote cooling pad, and they'll kind of draw the section getting frosty and cold without metal contact. And I point that out because some of the more expensive neck fans on the market, for example, the Taurus Coolify, actually use semiconductors on the surface here to physically get cold. It's not just a fan, which will actually get frosty using this kind of refrigeration technology. But some of the cheaper models, including this one here styled after a cartoon, is really just for show. The metal contact points here don't actually get cold when you turn it on. Not to mention that the adhesive for the side of some of the characters here are not done in the most quality way, and they feel a little bit loose. So as cute as the design here looks, if you do want some extra coldness, then this is probably a model that you'll want to avoid. There is a simple Type-C port on the side there for charging, and as a whole it is relatively lightweight. At the very least, it's not too loud, and the fan component does work as you would expect with 3 different settings. On the other hand, some of these mini cooling fans do actually have a real cooling pad, a semiconductor that does get physically cold, even though you have to hold it in your hands as opposed to wearing it around your neck, but they can be found for around $20 a pop. We have the green colored variant, and aside from the actual pocket fan, there's just a simple Type-C cable for charging and a quick user guide. It has a fairly compact appearance with a silicone strap here that you can use to carry it with you, a small flap that covers up the Type-C port for charging, ventilation grills, and on the inside there is a 2000 milliamp hour capacity battery that can operate this thing for around 5 hours or so of continuous use in the actual cooling ice mode before you have to top it up, so not bad. Long hold on the bottom key here to turn it on, and it starts off in just the fan mode. That being said, one strange aspect of the design is that the fan is technically blowing air from the side as opposed to directly facing you, and so if you are putting this into contact with your skin and feeling the coldness, the actual fan might be blowing in a slightly different direction instead of also coming out from the top. So that's a little bit strange, but overall still works, and the metal surface here does indeed get quite cold. You can also tap on the ice button here on the top to turn the actual cooling part on or off. You'll see the color there is slightly changed from a white color, which means it's turned off, versus a blue, that means that the cooling mode has been activated. And you can immediately tell that it's getting a little bit frosty on the surface here. So technically this 1-inch section in the middle is where the actual cooling part is functioning, and it does feel actually icy to the touch within just a few seconds of turning it on. So this one actually does work exactly as advertised. Next is this fancy looking air freshener for cars that's also dubbed as a perpetual motion machine, but really it's just using solar panels to supposedly rotate automatically whenever there is sunlight hitting on it, generating enough energy, and claims the motor here is quiet to not produce too much noise as it's rotating, and also works under cloudy weather as well. Included scents include sea, lemon. Here are some of the materials that they're using. They claim are made out of aluminum, and there's also going to be a speed here up to 600 RPM for the maximum rotation. And then there is a 3M sticky pad on the other side that you can use to mount it onto your dashboard so it doesn't actually move around. And what I can say is that the build here is indeed made out of aluminum alloys. It has a good density to it. There is the solar panel on the inside. The ball here on the top, though, is made out of plastic and has kind of an air bubble in this version, but still looks kind of interesting. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if it's because this unit is defective or what, but I was never really able to activate the solar panel for it to rotate by itself, even when placing it outdoors in direct sunlight. This seems to be kind of a dubious item, unless it's only doing that because as you're driving, the car is wobbly and moving around, as opposed to being a consistent motion powered by a motor. Kind of a shame, because it does indeed look quite cool from a design and concept perspective. Now moving into some cleaning tech. So specifically, this is a interesting high-tech slime. Like Play-Doh, you're able to squish it into keyboards as well as smaller grooves of buttons on your phone, for example, that are hard to clean and then take out all the dust and grit. And they claim that the overall material of the slime should also kill bacteria when you touch the surface, and in addition it changes color. So when it's new, it's more of this translucent yellow, but after you use it for enough times, it will eventually turn into this green color, which is when you know that you should probably throw out the slime. And at around $1 a pack, it's actually not bad in terms of it does indeed work. It's actually kind of satisfying to play around with as well. So for example, here I do have a lot of dust inside some of the grooves of the charging port. I'm just going to pop the slime into there, kind of stick it on for a couple of seconds, and then pop it out, and indeed it cleans up the entire surface. For things like keyboards, again, smaller areas that are hard to reach, you can consider something like this. And then similarly, there is a multi-cleaning pen, which often can be found for only around 30 cents, but also packs in things like a small sponge onto the pen barrel here, making it easier to clean out dust and lint from hard to reach areas. You have a small brush here on the side as well, and a small tip, using it like a toothbrush for ports on your phone or TWS wireless buds as well. So this is also okay, but I would argue that the efficacy of the slime is actually a little bit better at completely removing everything just by popping it in, requires a little bit less force. And last but not least, here is a smart ear cleaning tool. This is actually for people now, and this is interesting because it packs in Wi-Fi and a tiny little camera that you can use with a companion app on the phone to better see as you are cleaning inside of your ear. So it might be a little bit overkill for something that is so simple, but it does have LED lights on the tip as well that illuminates it, making it a little easier to spot. This particular model sells for only around $10, so also not too bad in terms of price range. It recharges using USB Type-C. So it's basically like one of those endoscope snake cameras, but again for the ear and just even smaller. Box here includes just a quick user guide, a USB Type-C cable, and inside this small little pill-shaped box includes some of the aforementioned silicone tips that you can attach onto the top to make the plastic feel a little bit more soft, and then that is the tiny camera as well as LED lights to illuminate things when you are looking at it. So it is impressive how they were able to miniaturize this tech to fit into something so tiny. The companion app, by the way, is called Soul Ear, and it just pairs via Wi-Fi, and you then have a connection into what the camera here is seeing in real time, and it is going to be a macro camera there in terms of focusing up close and be able to see those tiny details illuminated using those LED lights, as you can tell there. Otherwise, again, the responsiveness in terms of latency doesn't seem bad, and again, functions quite similarly to something like a home security cam, but just on a much smaller device. In the app here, we can also take a photo as well as record video if you want to do that for some reason, but that's more or less it. So a very simple app, functions well enough in terms of pairing and connectivity, not having too many problems there. Perhaps the only missing function would be the ability to change the brightness of those LEDs, making it brighter versus dimmer, or turn it completely off. Those settings seem to be missing on the app at the moment. And next are two mini microphones. The first one is a wired one that uses a 3.5mm jack, if your phone still has that. Alternatively, there's a wireless model as well that you can plug into, say, the Type-C port for Android devices or Lightning for iPhones. This should hopefully improve the audio pickup as you're recording video or some music as well. So the wired version is the cheapest, only selling for around $1 to $2, and kind of a cute, almost viral design in terms of just how small this mic is. We'll see if it's any good. Compared to the wireless model, it typically sells around $10. And of course, you have the flexibility of moving a little bit further away and still picking up your voice. But as a result, it's also going to be rechargeable, meaning it needs to have power for it to operate compared to a wired one, just simply plug and play. In the packaging here, we have just the microphone with a small kind of condenser sponge to dampen some of the ruffling and popping sounds, and just again has a simple USB Type-C port on the edge for charging and also a power key with a clip. The other side is the receiver tip that then plugs into your phone, and we also have a USB Type-C charging cable along the quick user guide. On the other hand, the mini mic actually is crafted out of aluminum metal compared to entirely plastic on the wireless one. There is no clip though, so you have to hold it like this. There is a slightly larger sponge there on the top, which you can remove to also see a continued kind of metal alloy build even on the inside here. However, as expected for a cheaper mic, the wire is not removable, so if it fries, you might be slightly out of luck. Although the wire material is also this fabric texture that feels a little bit more durable compared to just regular rubber, and there is also another end here with a 3.5mm receiver, meaning that you can have pass-through listening as you're recording audio at the same time. And now moving into a very quick demo, we're going to record using the mini mic here. So test, 1, 2, 3. So test, 1, 2, 3. Here's a sample of the mic quality using this tiny mic. And it's surprisingly good. A lot of clarity and detail, shockingly for something so small. It's actually a lot better sounding than I really expected. As for the wireless microphone, unfortunately, although it is quite convenient, the quality of the audio is actually not as good as the cheaper wired mic. I suspect part of the reason is because of the wireless transmission dropping some of the detail, but as a result it does sound a little bit more thin, doesn't sound as full as this mic. So recording music, for example, is just not going to sound as good on this wireless model, but for things like speech and vlogs, it can still be alright. Playing it back. Now moving into a test of the wireless microphone, how do I sound? 1, 2, 3. So basically it just distorts a little bit more at the higher volume levels and not quite as detailed and full sounding as the other mini mic, ironically enough, since this is the more expensive model. But at the very least, it is easy to use. The clip can be handy, and it's simply plug and play. You don't have to download any specific app. But again, for the best audio quality per se, I would have to point in the direction of the cheaper mini wired mic. And next I picked up a handful of cases from Temu, and because this is a relatively simple type of product, it's just a piece of silicone and rubber, it seems like a safer type of product to purchase and save some money on, especially since official cases from brands like Apple and Google can sometimes sell for $30 to even $50 a pop. It's actually quite expensive, and how a lot of phone manufacturers generate substantial revenue is through selling accessories like that, since there's larger profit margins. Compared to a lot of these cases here, only sell for about $1 or $2 if you're looking at the phone variants. But in this sampling, I have a couple which have kind of this decal wrapped on top that gives it actually a pretty attractive look. Various different artworks that you can pick between, and for the most part, I think that these cases have been holding up quite well. The rubber seems durable enough to protect areas including the buttons and keys, protecting the lens as well, and the paint for the most part hasn't really worn down even after using it for about a month or so already. The side bezels are also raised slightly above the display to add some additional protection when you're laying the phone case down on a table. Other ones can be a little bit more normal looking, I would say. This one here, for example, is just completely stealth black with some additional carbon fiber-like accents, but really it's just plastic down here. But I can't really complain and seems to be doing a pretty fair job making the phone actually feel quite grippy and easy to hold, not as slippery as before. Or of course cover it up using a more durable design case like this one, but it adds a bit more bulk, and some of the sliding mechanisms do feel a little bit on the tight side. So that is one area where maybe it's not quite as smooth compared to, say, OtterBox and more expensive rugged cases in the market, but it's still a thicker rubber as compared to the TPU style here, and it also adds something like a kickstand that you can also use to hold the phone a little bit more easily and rotate it as desired. So these ones are a little bit more functional, but also will add slightly more bulk. Alternatively, this one here is a little bit more, I guess, luxurious looking. It's more of a synthetic leather texture going on here, and there's also variants that you can pick up with bamboo wood. The sides are constructed out of the same kind of rubber material like the other cases that we saw, and still makes the entire phone flat without having the additional hump that the original design had, and can be nice for gripping it a little bit more easily. And the aforementioned Kindle Scribe case, which again is the more expensive one out of the bunch, I would say still is mostly justified because it is a magnetic folio style case that locks itself into place, and when you lift it up, it automatically turns the device on versus automatically turning it off. And even the folio here can be popped up like a kickstand to allow you to more easily read if you don't want to constantly hold onto the device. Overall, I would say my sampling thus far has been mostly successful, and I was content. Another category that seems to be popular would be humidifier. So we have two here for reference. One is supposed to be placed on the tabletop, having this interesting cat cartoon-like avatar. This is designed to make the air just a little less dry, for example, if you're in the wintertime, but similarly, if you're in the summer, it can also cool you off just a little bit with the mist. The smaller one here is a face humidifier, so I guess this is more meant for on-the-go use. You get that spray of mist that you can use to cool yourself down, also referred to as a nano-ionizing spray, so the water can be absorbed by your face and skin to better hydrate your face. Going for just $1 or $2, so not bad. It is made entirely out of plastic though. It doesn't feel extremely high quality, but I suppose good enough for what it is. Bottom here uses micro USB for charging, so Type-C would have been preferred, but it is what it is. Just a simple power on and off key. There's no real additional modes for changing the intensity of the mist that comes out, and there is a window or reservoir that you can check to see how much liquid is still inside. I would overall say though that 12 milliliters is quite small, so you can twist on the kind of top here to pull it off. So this is basically how much water it holds. All of the space at the bottom is just for the battery as well as the misting components. But on the positive side, it is a pretty tight seal for the bottle top. So even if you're putting it into a backpack and traveling, I haven't had any liquid spill during the process, which is definitely good. That said, because again the plastic here does feel a little bit on the cheap and hollowed side, you can tell that there has been a little bit of some small damage already to it, but overall it works. And I also like the fact that aside from spraying out the mist, you do also have a LED light at the very bottom as well, which kind of creates a nice aesthetic touch. The other cat tabletop humidifier overall is also quite lightweight, built out of plastic. Just a quick user guide along with another micro USB charging cable. So again, Type-C is really the standard these days, but they try to cut on costs in some of these small areas, but it is what it is. Again, there is no battery on this model, so it needs to be plugged in at all times for it to function. A simple power on and off key. Otherwise, if we twist open the top, it just contains a pretty large water reservoir or tank, and there's just a sponge basically that absorbs the water upwards and then sprays it out as mist. Indeed, it's functional with the LED light illuminating the kitten here with a soft RGB pattern that changes shades, although you can't really set it at a specific color of your choice, and there are no other transition modes aside from what we see here. It's either on or off, but still effective enough as a tiny lamp. Next up is this unusual Freshener portable purifier, which is just a electronic face mask. Claims to also combat allergies in the springtime as well if you are sensitive to pollen, for example. It's rated to be KN95. As compared to a conventional mask, there is a fan inside which is rechargeable that will circulate the air, preventing it from getting too stuffy over time if you're wearing it for slightly longer durations, which is, of course, one of the pain points of regular face masks. So this fan design is trying to mitigate that issue. And Xiaomi, by the way, also has another variant that is very similar. To some extent, it's even comparable to the Dyson air purifying headphones. But Dyson's model is ridiculed for its extremely high price of over $1,000, and by comparison, this is a lot more budget, selling for around 20 bucks or so. And on the inside, there is a soft carrying pouch, which houses the mask itself. And we'll take a closer look at the design here in a moment. You can actually pull off the main plate here, which is just held into place using magnets, and that's where you can pop in replacement filters, which looks something like this and comes in kind of a separate little box, and these can be swapped out. So again, the mask itself will be reusable except for the filters that continues to make the filtration process efficient. And on the inside here, we also have a charging cable using micro USB. Would have preferred USB Type-C, but it is what it is. Again, some of the additional mask filters that are replaceable, and then just a quick user guide. And the battery is rated to last around 6 hours of usage before you have to recharge it again in the fan electronic mode. Last but not least, we have just the strap using the buckles here located on the edges. And the end result will look something like this. Definitely has kind of a robotic steampunk appearance, can even be a prop, I suppose, in some type of science fiction film. It's a lot bulkier, though, than a conventional mask for sure. In fact, it looks a little bit ridiculous, and that is why the strap there, which is again removable, is so large, so that it supports the entire weight as you're wearing it. That being said, on the other side, you do have some relatively comfy silicone that is then covering up your mouth as well as nose area. Some vents here for the air to flow through, a simple power key, as well as a flap for covering up the micro USB charging port. Although I'm honestly not sure what's happening here at the very bottom, if that's supposed to have some additional air just flow through as you're breathing in and out, or if maybe this is already torn despite being a new unit. That would be definitely a shame, but regardless, you can tell how it's not completely airtight, like a N95 mask that can also filter through true virus and tiny bacteria particles, as opposed to, again, KN95, which means it's only really rated for larger particles, things like pollen. Anyways, if we turn on the power key there, you'll hear the fan whirl onto life. This is the sound that it produces. So not too bad, I suppose, kind of a white noise, and it does at least produce a nice breeze as you're wearing it. Definitely not quite as stuffy as aforementioned conventional masks. So comfort from a breathing perspective is at least quite good. And otherwise, you can also tap on the power key once more to illuminate a LED light, just making it glow a little bit more mysteriously in the dark. Just a single mode, but kind of an interesting touch. And you can also tap on the right key here to change the fan speed. So this is a faster mode. So I guess if you are really paranoid about smog and air pollution in your area, if you have severe allergies, then it might be something worth considering, although it still seems a little extra in my opinion in terms of the whole design of it. Still, again, these replacement filters technically it can last for up to 3 weeks with mild pollution, 1 week for heavy pollution, and it does have a HEPA filter in there as well, similar to regular room air purifiers. Alternatively, you can pick up a design that doesn't have a fan, but maybe just includes a small vent on the side that also allows some of the air to not fog up as quickly when you're wearing the mask. So a design like this has a very similar benefit of being a little bit more breathable, but at the same time doesn't require you to charge it, and it's also less bulky as well. So it might make more sense, but of course that wouldn't be quite as high-tech. Now here we have another item, which is a mini sealing machine. Let's say you purchase a large bag of chips or snacks you aren't able to finish, you can then seal up the bag using this machine that essentially just applies heat and kind of melts the plastic, but then binds it together to prevent any air from coming out, making the food become soggy over time. Also a pretty low-cost item, as you can tell there, working with plastic bags and not for paper or aluminum bags, since those materials won't really melt using the heat here. So very simple packaging. A few different color variants can also be found, and the actual device here, quite small. It's made out of plastic, but does have a magnet on the back as well that you can use to attach it onto a fridge, for example. An interesting extra. You can pull open the hinge here. This is a head that will get really hot, and also this is the battery compartment down below, What is quite strange though is that this doesn't seem to have a dedicated power on and off key. So whenever you kind of squeeze it together using the hinge mechanism, that triggers the actual heat to be activated. I would have preferred maybe a safety power button though, just to make it a little easier to prevent the battery from leaking. If it accidentally gets squished in the drawer, for example, it might be a little bit more safe. Applying a bit of pressure over the point that we want to start at, and then starting to move by pulling the bag towards the side, and then releasing it. What we can tell is indeed the bag has been sealed up. So the heat component actually works better than expected. It's actually quite fast. That being said, because the heating component is a little bit on the sharp side, and as a result, it tends to also tear the bag as you're pulling it along. The bottom section though is still sealed together in terms of the plastic, so it does do its job of preventing air from coming out, but it might also slightly rip the bag in terms of not making it look quite as pretty. That being said, you can always consider things like clips or use a rubber band to seal it together. It might not be quite as airtight, but ultimately making it a little easier to still open and close when you want to continue eating it. But if you want to store it for longer durations of time, I guess something like this could be worth considering. Now moving into a section I'll refer to as travel accessories. We've got two bands which claim to be mosquito repellents. This one in particular has a slightly more stylish design to it, but it just uses patches that you can insert into the bracelet, which can last for about a week's time before you should swap it out. And the actual silicone section is also scented to be repelling, and that part can last around 30 days. So if you look very closely, the chrome edge on the top, which is technically made out of plastic, includes some of the vents, very similar to an air freshener, but you can again remove this part to interchange these tiny little, essentially sponges, which have been scented. It smells kind of like citrus, and this scent supposedly will prevent mosquitoes from maybe smelling your natural sweat and body odor, hopefully preventing you from getting stung and bitten quite as easily. And overall, again, just looks a little bit more attractive. Comes with a few different replacement packs as well with those scented sponges. But it kind of reminds me of something like a Xiaomi Mi Band from back in the day, perhaps one of the early generation models with the silicone strap, and then you have just this kind of gel-based solution essentially that can last upwards of 2 to 3 weeks, although the actual smell is quite different from this one, which is a more noticeable lemony smell. This one has more of a artificial scent, which is actually not quite as noticeable either, so not very strong smelling. Otherwise, there are various styles of these repellent bracelets floating around, some of them which are electronic and supposedly plays back a frequency range that will scare off mosquitoes. However, it has mostly proven to be pseudoscience, and research seems to indicate that these electronic devices don't really seem to be effective in actually driving away mosquitoes as much as solution and scent-based options. So though these seem to be more high-tech and can have some additional functionality, including acting as a clock for showing you the time, they're actually not quite as effective as the scented options, which are also, again, a little bit cheaper. In the same category, I also found some of these tiny paper soap that you can also purchase, and the claim here is that it's going to be easier for you to just remove one particular sheet, apply a little bit of water, and then rinse off to wash your hands. In fact, it's just regular soap, just applied in smaller quantities for kind of a single time use, and can be kind of a, I guess, convenient option if you are camping or you're going somewhere and you want to, again, wash your hands quickly. That being said, another option would be hand sanitizer. Since that doesn't require you to actually have water, this still requires you to, again, wet your hands and scrub to activate the soap. And 3 final travel accessories include 2 interesting sleeping pillows. Now, we've all seen those inflatable U-shaped pillows that you can use for sleeping, some of them which are also memory foam, but this one is a little bit different because on the inside, there's just this piece of metal that is wrapped around in this fabric, which can support the weight of your neck as you're leaning on it in one direction. And so the benefit here is it provides more of a firm position as you're actually resting compared to some of those traditional air-filled or even memory foam solutions, which can either be heavier to carry or sometimes it's just too loose. And so as you rest on it, your head still droops down. In comparison, this model provides you with a more comfortable position that is going to hold the weight of your head a little bit more easily and just reduce some of that neck strain since the entire thing is wrapped tightly around you as you are sleeping. Very small and simple design, just using Velcros to unwrap, but this has to be actually one of my favorite, I think, sleeping pillows for travel that I've come across, and it is actually quite a comfy experience, although it does apply a little bit of heat because it wraps around your neck. Another alternative that has been a little popular recently is this much larger, almost like a live vest style. It's also inflatable, but what makes it different is it pops up on the tray table in front of you if you're on a flight, and you pop your head down on it and your arms go inside of the two positions on the side. And as a result, it also claims to be more ergonomic compared to, again, those conventional U-shaped pillows. Granted, this one is a little bit more tedious in the sense that you do have to blow it up with air and then just inflate it to become smaller when you're traveling, so there's an extra step involved compared to the other one that we saw. In addition, the expanded mass is quite large, so whether you feel necessarily comfortable or just a little bit conscious and awkward of having people potentially stare at you using such a giant pillow, not to mention the act of kind of inflating something so large on a plane, might seem just a little bit on the silly side, since it does echo a design of a life vest in a sense. That being said, the comfort is quite good and you can use it in various different angles, but in terms of practicality, I would say the other one actually is probably still my favorite. Okay, last but not least, we have on this tube basically a leg rest that you're supposed to pop onto the front of the tray table seat like so, and as a result it kind of transforms a economy seat into something like premium or business class, as it allows your feet to incline, lie a little bit more flat. So the premise there is quite interesting and it's fairly well presented, also very compact. In practice, though, I would say this one is just so-so, in the sense that it does kind of work in terms of, again, just making your feet feel a little bit more comfy, but it still tends to droop down a little bit at a steep incline, and so part of the weight is still felt by your ankles. And so for shorter bursts of sleeping, it might be okay, but for longer flights, it's still not really the same thing as lying completely flat, and after a while, your feet can still feel a little bit fatigued. But an interesting idea, I suppose, a mini hammock for your feet. And the final section of this video is what I'll categorize as miscellaneous. It may not be strictly tech per se, but just some quirky, fun products I found that I was curious about and wanted to take a closer look. So the first two are musical items of sorts. On our channel, we previously reviewed some smart instruments, including the Populele Smart Ukulele, as well as the Popu Piano, teaching you how to play the ukulele as well as the piano respectively using the companion app. This is much more of just a manual instrument, but still kind of a cute one. It's called a Kalimba and kind of reminds me of a ukulele in terms of the sound it produces. It's also popular in tropical locations. These Kalimbas can also come in various sizes, including 21 keys versus 17 keys. The price will vary a little bit. The design here is also crafted out of wood and, again, fairly affordable. There's even a tiny miniaturized keychain version as well that includes fewer notes that you can play, but it's kind of just a cute keychain accessory in that instance. There's a hard shell carrying case, and on the inside here, aside from the instrument we'll take a closer look at, there's a microfiber cleaning cloth, another soft carrying pouch, and you also get some quick instructions as well as music that you're able to master on here, telling you the basics of this instrument and how to play certain notes as well as scales, and master some quick songs can also be played here, including Happy Birthday, Ode to Joy, so on and so forth. So it can be actually a pretty fun little gift idea there, even though it doesn't have necessarily any electronic component to it, but for music lovers might be fun. There's even a sticker that you can apply on the instrument to give you a hint of some of the notes that you want to press on for different songs if it makes learning a little bit easier. And here is the tiny hammer here, also crafted out of metal. And surprisingly, the instrument feels quite well crafted. Again, very similar to a ukulele or even a guitar. You have that resonant chamber, and then all the keys on the top here are crafted out of metal. That is more or less it. So if we start pressing on some of the keys here, you can hear that surprisingly produces quite a beautiful sound, which is loud and clear, despite being such a simple instrument. All the keys, by the way, are also labeled, so you can read them back, and you can also use the tiny hammer to kind of slide along if preferred. But honestly, I feel like using your fingers produces a slightly more satisfying sound, which can be louder as well, depending on how hard you're pressing down, and that can't really be adjusted using the hammer. That requires just a little bit more precision, but there is that alternative. The other item here being a tiny little music box that can be also an interesting gift idea or a desk gadget or toy, I suppose. They claim that these have been handmade, and in person it kind of feels like they just used a laser engraver with some polywood and they carved in some patterns, but this is the Star Wars version, for instance, and will play back the famous Star Wars theme song as well. And overall, you can pop it open at an angle there, and it says, "May the Force be with you," and of course the tiny little kind of metal wheel here that you can spring to play back the tune. If not a fan of Star Wars per se, you can find other popular culture references from movies, TV shows, and the like, and they can all be customized, but they're quite similar in terms of the way they look and the size as well. So overall, not bad, I'd say, but perhaps the Kalimba I find to be just a little bit more fun because you can personalize the music yourself by mastering different music, but this one, of course, can only play back one song. And on the topic of keychains, you can also find some interesting pendants as well as even necklaces that are themed after different things, including zodiacs as well as astrological signs. So this can be also another kind of interesting gift idea. They're often just extremely low cost there, and you can find also a quick description of what that particular sign symbolizes. The particular example here is also crafted out of metal, seems to be of a decent enough quality, along with just a traditional hook there at the very back. Now moving into some plush/food inspired items, but with a twist. It's not really what they seem. For example, this little strawberry is actually a shopping bag. So if you are going to a market these days that don't give you free shopping bags anymore, you have to bring your own. This can be a very compact way of doing so. It's a pretty regular sized bag, and afterwards you can just crumple it together again into the strawberry section when you are done, which is just attached onto one of the edges of the bag and then hang it onto a backpack or somewhere for easier transit. Kind of a neat idea. Other items here are a little bit more just for fun, including this seemingly convincing watermelon, but this is actually a cushion. One of those optical illusion type products, but in fact it's quite soft. It's just a memory foam on the inside that you can pop onto a chair, for instance, or even onto the ground if you're sitting down having a picnic. And a very simple product, but kind of fun in the way that it's designed, I suppose. What I will say, though, is that the images do make it seem like this is a thicker cushion than the actual one in front of us. So here's the ad, for example, which has a stronger texture of the melon shell compared to this one, which is just completely green without some of those stripes, and it just seems a little bit more shallow, for lack of a better description. That being said, the hook here is still on the edge. The overall concept is still quite convincing, I would say. It is what it is. You have some other designs as well, including citrus, grapefruit that you can sit on as well. And similarly, this is a bread pillow that you can use for also sleeping. But again, it's just styled very convincingly to something like a piece of French loaf, and the bread texture here is actually simulated quite well. You can even get this in different size variants. This is one of the more compact ones. There's larger versions as well. If you're looking for just a very strange food-inspired type of pillow, which is quite soft, I would say. Alternatively, some other kind of fun, cute plush items like this octopus, which has a smiley face and then flips over to become a angry face, can also be found, although some of the stitching work doesn't seem to be 100% the best quality in the world, as you can tell there, but concept is still fun enough, I will say. Or this strange looking blanket that for some reason has a bear on it, but it's actually styled after food items, including a tortilla wrap. Again, is it the most practical item in the world? No, definitely a novelty item, but again, gives you an idea of some of the very eccentric, strange items that you can find on a site like this if you're looking for something just really eccentric as a potential gift idea. So there we have it. That's been a haul, really a collection, I would say, of some strange items that I found on Temu. Again, this video is not sponsored, so all the items that you see here are honest impressions just by taking a closer look at them. And in terms of the quality of the sampling there, I would say it's kind of a mixed bag overall. Again, don't expect the quality to be the best that you've ever seen, but the cost also kind of reflect that. I would say categories including phone cases seems to be mostly positive. You can't really go wrong too much there. Some of the lighting type products that we saw earlier also seem to be fair enough. Not to mention some authentic products from larger brands, including Xiaomi as well as Lenovo that we've mentioned earlier as well. Those can all be, I guess, decent choices. Other ones, though, you have to be a little bit more careful of, whether it's quality being just a little bit iffy, or if it's the concept itself, although interesting at first glance, might actually be a little bit impractical as you take a closer look at it. So those are some of the examples that we also highlighted throughout this video. But nonetheless, still kind of a fun, entertaining look at some of the unusual type of products that you can find on the site. And echoing a similar sentiment from the beginning of this video, if it's a product that you can actually find value in, such as the aforementioned phone cases, getting it from Temu seems fair enough, at least in my experience. And again, everything I ordered did come arriving on time, if not even a little bit earlier than expected. So seems to be decent enough there. So you can check out more details if interested. But for now, that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews, a collection of rather unique and strange products from Temu.